didn't trust Catholics. Until meeting my daughter, he never had a positive encounter with a practicing Catholic. And I'll admit that hurt me. It hurt me because someone in our church, the church I really love, hurt him and broke his trust. Since becoming friends, he has made comments to me like, wow, you aren't what I thought Catholics were really like. Or what is this that you believe? He's interested in referencing a question to me about what we believe in our rituals. This pastor has now developed a trust in me as a Catholic believer. I'd like to make a point here is that we don't have a threshold label for before this, meaning people that don't have an initial trust or aren't even at that first threshold yet. This could include young adults that have left the church after confirmation or marriage, young adults who have received the sacraments, or young adults that have never ever been in church. Remember, Katie mentioned earlier that a large percentage of millennials are disaffiliated with the church, so they don't have an initial trust factor. The next threshold is spiritual curiosity. In this step, someone would find themselves intrigued by desiring to know more about Jesus, his life, and his teaching, or some aspect of Christian faith. This curiosity can range from mere awareness of a new possibility to something quite intense. Nevertheless, a person at this threshold is curious, but he's not yet open to personal change. I had a friend who recently asked me if he would attend Mass with me. He wasn't ready to jump in all the way, both feet, or even make a change. But he was more curious what a Catholic Mass was like. And he shared with me that he'd never even been in a Catholic church. The threshold of spiritual openness is next. In this phase, someone would acknowledge to themselves and to God that he or she is open to the possibility of a personal or spiritual change. Openness is not a commitment to change. People who are open are simply admitting that they're open to the possibility of change. My friend who asked to come to church is not open to the possibility of change. Openness, though, can often be triggered by a major life event. Having children, someone dying, getting sick. Spiritual seeking, in this stage, people move from being passive about their faith to actively seeking to know the God who called him or her. It is, if you will, dating with a purpose, but not yet marriage. Seekers are asking, are you the one to whom I'll give myself? At this stage, the seeker is engaged in an urgent spiritual quest, seeking to know whether he or she can commit to Christ or the church. For me, this looked exactly for me when I started actively going to Mass. I signed up to be a catechist, and I started talking to Jesus at daily Mass. I didn't do this until I was 30 years old. The last threshold is intentional discipleship. In this last phase, people decide to make a conscious commitment to follow Jesus and to go out and spread the gospel. You're dropping the net. You're sharing your faith with others. You are all in. Unfortunately, most of our parishioners and the folks out in the community are at the beginning stages. The people that are actually walking through our doors are in the pre-evangelistic stage. If our Bible studies, our small group communities, our spiritual book clubs, and our programs are reaching the already engaged students and parishioners, how are we reaching the 80 to 70% of them in our pews who don't have that, who don't acknowledge Jesus in the Eucharist? How are we ever going to reach the people outside the doors? The reason we're sharing this information on Threshold is to give you an idea where young adults might fall. To show, though we have a lot of ground to cover, we need to lay down some stuff before we start getting our kids and getting our millennials back in church. Our initial goals should be to build and install that initial trust, to build relationships with them.
Our second tip and takeaway that we have today directly goes along with trying to build initial trust is meeting people's basic needs. How are we meeting our young adults where their basic needs are? I remember very clearly as a broke college student coming home to my parents' house over some sort of break with a giant bag of dirty laundry. I hadn't had an actual meal in like however many weeks. I'm exhausted, stressed out, and I need rest and refuge. And I can physically remember what it was like stepping over the threshold to my parents' home and feeling this instant relief, right? Like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was home. Everything about coming to my parents' house reminded me of home, right? Even when I walked in, there's like that certain smell that's like, oh, this is home, okay? Instead of bombarding me with questions, asking me about my life choices, my parents welcomed me with warm hugs, a hearty home-cooked meal. They would ask me how I was doing, how are you feeling? They would take my laundry upstairs and let me crash in my bedroom. This place became a refuge to me, somewhere I could go to feel safe. And even now, at 31 years old, I feel like I'm still coming home when I go to my parents' house. As Catholics, how do we create this feeling for our young adults in our communities? How can we help make our churches feel like a place of refuge or safety? So one of our first, and I would say probably arguably the most important thing that we need to survive is sustenance, right? We need food, we need water to stay alive. And throughout the gospel, Jesus used this as a method to reach people. He would literally feed people before leaving them with a message, right? Remember the story of the feeding of the thousands. I know this idea might seem trivial, but remember back to your days as a young adult. You might have struggled to make ends meet. So your grocery list consisted of ramen noodles, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, rice and beans. Or maybe you're on the other end of a young adult, you're struggling professionally, you're working all the time, you're so busy, maybe you have young little children, and you don't have time to make a home-cooked meal. You're living off of fast food. Neither of these options screams healthy nourishment and sustenance. I love this quote from the book of James. It states, "If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill,' and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that?" I think this is an awesome confrontation that we need reminding of once in a while. What better way to serve our young adults in our communities than with a warm home-cooked meal? How do we evangelize someone who has more pressing things to think about, like, do I have enough money to cover rent this month? When am I going to be able to afford groceries next? These are actual issues our young adults are faced with. I recall my time in Ireland as a college student. I studied abroad there for 6 months. It was the first time that I was living on my own, outside of a dorm. I had my own budget. I was in a foreign place without a community, and I didn't have any family nearby. But this Irish family, I don't know if they took pity on me, I'm not really sure, but they took me in under their wings, and I would go to their house once or twice a month to spend the night or the weekend with their family. And they would always feed me this elaborate, delicious Irish meal. And I felt so taken care of and loved by this family, a family that I had never met before going to Ireland. By sharing a meal, by literally breaking bread together, I became a part of this little family's community. Who do you have in your life that you can invite over for a home-cooked meal? What young adults could you serve by breaking bread with them? How could you use a meal to maybe break the ice with a young adult in your life, a grandchild, a child that you haven't seen in a while?
So how do we create that refuge for young adults or young parents? You might have the best intentions. Your parish may have welcomers that posted at every door. You may look at every face with a smile and tell them good morning, good evening. And I hold the door for every single person that walks in, and if you can say that in all honesty, that's great. People might even smile back at you and repeat your welcome. But know that behind that smiling facade, there might be big issues. Are we a shelter? Are we a refuge for those that walk through our door? Pay attention. It's all in the details. When I was first in public education, when I first got there, at the request of a principal, I took in a middle school student as an intern. He had an interest in technology, and he would come in after school and help us out. He hadn't worked with me long, when one night, as we're walking to one of the labs to work on them, update some software, out of the blue he says, "My mom's been drinking again." I'm in IT. We didn't cover that in college. I didn't see it coming. And in that moment, I had no idea what to say. And I uttered what I believed the Holy Spirit told me to say. I said, "Tell me about it." And for the next hour, as we worked on those computers, he told me about his home life. He told me how he was picked on by other kids, and my office, our IT shop, from 3:10 to 5 o'clock, became his refuge. I have used that line, "Tell me about it," dozens of times since. And not just on students, but on teachers and administrators who have come into my office and closed the door. And I can tell something's wrong. And I ask them, "How are you?" And they give the Wisconsin response, "Good." And then I ask them again, "How are you really doing?" And when they break, I ask them, "Tell me about it." And for 15 minutes, or a half hour, or one time 4 hours, my office became a refuge and a shelter for them. And it continued to be a shelter for them. We need to find ways to make our church and our people in our church refuges for those who walk in our doors. The next basic human need is acceptance. The next basic need is acceptance. Hit escape. Get out of the presentation mode. The Gen Xer helping, or the baby boomer helping the millennial.
judged, this is where you belong. If you feel ashamed or trapped, it's nothing you you will find forgiveness and freedom. Right here.
I don't know if you've seen the Jesus Revolution. If you get a chance to watch it, it's a pretty good movie. Note how the traditional people, there was only one in this section, treated the hippies. Now that was great because the child of the 70s, they're all barefoot. And what does this guy do? He washes their feet, just like Jesus. So who are the hippies today? Our millennials. They walk in our doors, they have colored hair, they have tattoos everywhere, they have piercings of all kinds of body parts. They're gay, they're divorced, remarried. Know this, they may not be the young adults you see, but instead, they may also be your friends. Your friends that are sitting with you and you're judging on the children they know, the hippies in their lives. Before I left my job in public education, I was working with a woman who walked away from the Catholic Church because their priest wouldn't accept her son, who was gay. The priest would actually bring up condemnation of her son in his homilies when this young man or his mother were in church, even at a wedding. And one day, as the last straw, she walked away. Her relationship with Jesus was broken long before the relationship with her priest and her church. And she felt she had to choose between her love for the Lord and the love for her son. She no longer felt accepted by her church. And that has to change.
So I really wanted to show you guys another video clip, but I think we are coming up on time soon, so I just want to be conscientious of that. But if you have a chance, or if you haven't seen it yet, The Chosen has a video clip of the woman at the well. It's a story that we've probably all heard before. But I wanted to share that clip with you because I think Jesus is the best role model in loving others. Right? The definition for love is giving to someone without expecting anything in return. And Jesus was the master of this. He literally gave of himself so that we could have everlasting life. I challenge you to think about how you love others around you. Do you love the people that are easiest to love? I remember going through education classes at St. Norbert, and we had a professor tell us that the students that are the hardest to love need the most love. How can we be Christ to other people through loving them?
One of their basic needs was community. The Lord said, "It's not good that man should live alone. I will make him a helper as his partner." So out of the ground the Lord formed every animal of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the cattle and the birds and every animal of the field. But for man, there was not found a helper as his partner. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And as he slept, he took one of the ribs and closed up that place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord had taken from the man, he made into a woman, brought it to him. And the man said, "This at last is the bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, and I shall call her woman. For out of man this one was taken." We were never meant to go through life alone. But our current generation has this notion that their identity is defined by the number of friends they have on social media, and how many likes on their posts they get, and how many followers they have. Okay, that's not community. It's not the desire we seek for a real human contact. A real human needs to belong to something bigger than a community. How do we make our church more of a community? We need to create authentic relationships with our young people. If we're ever going to ask them or want them to seek an authentic relationship with our Lord.
All right, and I think this is our last tip and takeaway. But what do you think it means to be other-focused? What do you think this looks like in day-to-day life? So I have a little story that I want to share. It's not one of my proudest moments. But I used to own my own business before I got into ministry, between teaching and when I worked at Our Lady of Lourdes. I joined the business as a poor teacher to get a discount on the products that I wanted. And then I started selling them to my friends to earn some fun money, right? Well, I accidentally rose through the ranks of the company fairly quickly. I give that up to maybe Irish charm, I'm not sure. But if you aren't familiar with an MLM or a multi-level marketing company, you take money off, or you earn money off of the people who are underneath you in the company and on the product that they sell. So I don't know, I think I was kind of good at this, and so good that I earned a free car through the company. So while it was really cool to drive a sweet new ride, before that I was driving a 2007 Buick, it was a tank. But I had this agenda, right? And my friends started to feel that from me. You can tell when someone has an agenda, right? Have you ever been to a car dealership? Honestly, at this point in my life, I thought I was on the top of the world. I was kind of this boss babe, working my business, driving my free car, but I was losing friends. And my business went from something that was fun, something fun I did on the side, to something that I had to depend on because it was my living. My friends, my family, my customers could tell that I had this agenda. It's manipulative, right? Our conscience knows when we have an agenda. I share this story because I think it's important that we have healthy intentions. It's so important that our agenda is people. We can't worry about our young adults joining the parish so that they can pay dues or padding our numbers or volunteering for us. Young adults crave authenticity and sincerity, and they can sniff out an agenda a mile away. So how do we start focusing on them, what they need, what they want? So we want to leave you today with practical ways to live out these tips and takeaways on welcoming millennials and young adults to church or back to church. When I got hired at Our Lady of Lourdes back in 2019, I was asked to create this young adult ministry. But the parish didn't currently have one, and they didn't have a history of having one, so I felt a little lost on where to start. I had no ministry experience, I didn't have a budget. The only thing in my favor was that I was a young adult. But I want to give you hope today that anyone that is passionate about our young adults, helping young adults, building community, creating connections, and evangelizing, that you can implement these projects and ideas as well. So one of the things that we started off with was hosting events off campus. If you've been hurt by church before, coming to a church event might not be like the